Hello everyone. So this is actually the part 2 of the session that we had on the socio-religious reformist movement. Okay, so we will be looking into what are the two different type of movement. That is, what is reform movements and what is reformist movement and what is revivalistic movement. What is the difference between both of this? So please understand that the reform movements, it means that those are the movements which wanted to make a change in the structure of a religion, the structure of a society. They want to remove certain social evils from the very structure of a religion or structure of a society. So they want to make changes within the existing institutions. Whereas if you take the case of revivalistic movements, that what we can find that they want to bring back the glorious past, or they want to bring the society back into the glorious past. So this is the difference. So we can see that the Brahmo Samaj, the Prarthana Samaj and Aligarh movement, these all are the reformist movements. These are the reformist movement. So they wanted to worked for, they wanted to make a change within the structure of a society in a way that they want to remove a particular social evil which is existing society or religion. Say for example, take the case of the very degraded condition of women that existed during the period of 18th and 19th century. So from that you can understand that the reformers, these reformist movements, they will be moving against the Parda system, the system of polygamy that existed, and it will be also moving against the Sati, because these are the social levels which actually degraded the very status of the woman during that period. So they advocated, they've given proper awareness to the people, they've given proper awareness in the society so as to bring back a social system where these social levels are removed from the society. Okay, so now take the case of revivalistic movements. You can find that the Arya Samaj and the Deoband movements, these two are the examples of the revivalistic movements. So we have already discussed what is revivalistic movement. Okay, now if you take the differences between both of these, that we can find that the difference, these both movements, they differs in the degree to which it relied on the tradition or on reason and conscience. So we know that the reformist movements, they will be looking, the reformist movements, they will be looking into the very rationalism, they will be looking into the very reason. So they will be applying the ideology of nationalism even into the case of religion. Okay, and take the case of revivalistic movements, they want to take back the society back into its glorious past. So they want to bring it back into its glorious past. Okay, now we will be looking into the social reform and religious reforms, how they are related to each other, how they are connected with each other. Okay, and we already discussed that the educated middle class people, they got inspired from these humanistic ideals. What are the humanistic ideals that they got inspired? Social equality and the equal worth of all individuals, that they learned, they understand these ideals from the Western culture. Okay, now we will be looking into how actually the social reform movements and the religious reform movements, how they are connected, or can we separate the social reform movements from the religious reform movements, or can we treat this social reform movements very separately from religious reform movements? No, because both of these are linked to each other. We found that the social reform movements, they were linked to the religious reforms. So take the case of any social evil that we can find in the Indian society. So nearly all the social ills that we can find in the society, you can take the case of untouchability and also the gender based inequality. These kind of social evils, social ills, they got derived from the religion only. So initially, for someone who want to make changes in the social structure, who want to bring some certain changes in the society, that is the social reformations, he want to give awareness to the people, that is for making changes in the religious structure itself. So the changes has to be made in the religious structure, that is they want to go for the religious reforms. So it is actually linked, the social reform and the religious reformations, both are actually linked in the very initial stages, and only it is in the very later years that we can find that the social reform movement got dissociated from the religion, and later the social reform movements, it adopted a secular approach. That is only in the very later years. So please understand this concept. And we had already discussed about the social base of the reform movements. The social base for the reform movements that were actually upper class and middle class people. So it was limited to the upper class and middle class people. It means that the social base was very narrow. So social base for these reform movements, it was very narrow. So it is only in the later years, it is only in the very later period that we can find that these social reform movements got penetrated into the lower strata of the society. And what we see when we come to the 20th century, when we move towards the 20th century, there we find the national movement, the nationalist movement, those nationalistic movement, those leaders, those nationalist movement which actually give the leadership and organizations for this social reform, it actually got clubbed together. The social reformations and also the nationalist movement, they clubbed together. What we can find in the 20th century. Okay, so there were in the very beginning we can find several organizations which were actually looked into this kind of reformations. That is the Social Conference was one organization, Servants of India Society, and also the role of Christian missionaries. They were very instrumental, they were very important in case of social reformations. And also we can find many enlightened individuals like Jyotiba Phule, Gopal Hari Deshmukh, K.T. Thilang, B.M. Malabhari, D.K. Kharve and Srinarayana Guru, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, and also B.R. Ambedkar. So we will be looking into these personalities later. Okay, one by one we will be looking into that later, because these are very important fact, because UPSC may ask this in your preliminary examinations. Also you can expect some in mains also. And you have to understand that what were the medium which was used by these reformers, that is to in order to get penetrated into the lower strata of people. That is in order to reach the masses. Initially we know that the social base which was very less. Later these reformers, they used several Indian languages to propagate that is through variety of media. You can see novels, dramas, poetry, short stories, the press, and later in 1930s and later on cinema was also added, that is to spread the opinions. So please note this medias. Okay, now moving to the fight for the betterment of position of women. We know that this is an important agenda of the social reformations, because women, they were having a very deteriorated, very degraded condition, very deteriorated status that they enjoyed in those period, that is 18th, 19th century. So women, they were generally had a very low status when we considered them with the men. So when we considered them with the men, they had a very inferior to the men. They were given very low status. We can find that there were no identity of their own for the woman. And in case of women, these suppressions, that we can find that there were several practices, like we can find out the Parda system, the early marriage, the ban on widow remarriage. So the ban on widow marriage, and also you see the very important, the very drastic evil that we can, very drastic social evil that existed was sati also. So these were the certain social evils that existed in case of a woman, which actually degraded her position. So if we move across the religion, that is both in Hindu and Muslim women, both in these two religions, that is Hindu and Muslim, there were, what we can find that there were these women, they were economically and socially dependent on the male relatives. Okay, there were no identity of their own. They were not enjoying any identity of their own, no individuality. They have to depend both for economically and therefore socially. They want to depend upon the male relatives. And also we can find that the education was also denied to them. Whereas if you look into the case of Hindu women, what we can find is that they did not enjoy the right to inherit a property. Okay, so they did not enjoy the right to inherit property. Whereas if you look into the case of Muslim women, what we can find, they could inherit the property, but only half as much as the man could. And also what we can find in case of Hindu women is that they don't have the right to terminate an undesirable marriage. They don't have the right to terminate an undesirable marriage. Take the case of divorce that we already discussed. There were no equality between men and women in the matters of divorce. And see polygamy, the polygamy which was also very prevalent among both Hindus and Muslims. And see the improvement of the status of the woman, which was very important for the growth of a society. And see the way these reformers, how they appealed to the society, how they appealed is that they had applied different doctrines of individualism and equality, because they got inspired from these values, and they appealed for these doctrines of individualism and equality. They wanted the changes to be made in the society, they wanted to see these changes in the society. So they argued that the true religion did not sanction the inferior status of women. So if you're believing in a true religion, then you have to understand that the true religion did not sanction an inferior status to women. So please understand this. So these were the appealing which was the reformers they made. Now we will be looking into the different measures which were taken, that is to ameliorate the woman's position, that is to upgrade the woman's position. Okay, so in the steps that were taken to ameliorate the woman's position, first we will be discussing about the different administrative measures which were taken by the government, that is to improve the condition of women. Take the case of sati. Okay, so being influenced by the fight or the frontal attack which was made by the enlightened Indian reformers, who were actually led by the Rajaram Mohan Roy. So being influenced by the movements, being influenced by the frontal attack which was made by the Indian reformers, who were actually led by the Rajaram Mohan Roy, the government declared the practice of sati illegal and also punishable by criminal court as culpable homicide, which resulted into the regulation of 1829 or the Bengal Code of 1829, which was initially, it was only applicable in the very first instance, that it only in the Bengal presidency only, and later it got extended into the slightly in a modified form, that into Madras and Bombay presidencies, that in the 1830. Okay, so please remember this regulation of 1829 or the Bengal Code of 1829, that it made the practice of sati illegal and also punishable by the criminal code. So this was actually because of the efforts which was made by the Indian reformers, who were actually led by the Rajaram Mohan Roy. Okay, so because of the pressure, because of these movements, the government declared the practice of sati as illegal. Now coming to the next social level, that is the female infanticide. So we already discussed about this. There were a practice of murdering the female infants. It was very common that in the upper classes among the Bengalis and also Rajputs, which these upper class among the Bengalis and Rajputs, they considered the females as an economic burden. You can still find the remnants of this view even still in the Indian society, even till in this modern time. And again, what happened? There were Bengal regulations of 1795 and 1804 which declared this infanticide as illegal, which is equivalent to murder. And later an act which was passed in 1870, which it made compulsory. So it was made compulsory that the parents now has to register the birth of all babies. And also there were verifications which was done by the government, that is regarding the female children, and also some years after birth also. And see, this was particularly done mostly in the areas which these customs which was restored to it utmost secrecy, which were done in utmost secrecy. So these kind of measures which were taken by the government, that is in order to prevent the female infanticide. Okay, now take the case of widow remarriage. Here we can find that the Brahmo Samaj had this issue of widow remarriage. They had taken the issue of widow remarriage high on its agenda. They were given a serious importance to this. They were working mainly on this particular thing, that is for the issue of widow remarriage. Okay, and they did much to popularize it. And talking about this widow remarriage, that we have to, it is very important, that is regarding the efforts which was made by the Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Okay, he was a principal of the Sanskrit College, Calcutta. He has made several efforts, and ultimately it resulted into the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act of 1856, which it was passed, by which it legalized the marriage of widows. And we can see that the Vidyasagar, he cited several Vedic texts. He cited Vedic texts and asked people to look into that the Hindu religion actually sanctioned with the proof he had mentioned that the Hindu religion actually sanctioned the widow remarriage. Okay, and please note these two names, that is Jagannath Shankar Seth and also Babu Dhaji. They were the active promoters of girls' school in Maharashtra. Please note these type of names and all, because UPSC can ask you this in your preliminary. They can give you a certain set of names and ask you how they are, what are the importance of these personalities. This is a question that they are asking in recent times. And please note this, Vishnu Shastri Pandit, he founded a widow remarriage association in the 1850s. And see, Karson Das Mulji, he started Satya Prakash in Gujarati language that in 1852, that is in order to advocate the widow remarriage. And in Western India, we can see that Professor D.K. Kaur, his involvement, that he dedicated his life, that is for the upliftment of Hindu widows, and he was a secretary to the Widow Remarriage Association, and he also opened Widows Home in Pune. Okay, that is, and see, also provided the high caste widows, high caste Hindu widows, he provided provided certain facilities for the vocational training. And please note this, Veeraselingam Pantulu, that in the Madras. And also note B.M. Malabari and also Narmad, that is Narmada Shankar Lav Shankar Dev. Okay, and Justice Govind Mahadev Ranade and K. Nadarajan. All these, they advocated the rights of widows to remarriage. So please note these names, these are important, and please do try to relate these with the widow remarriage, that is for the upliftment of woman. Okay, now coming to the child marriage, what have done to control this child marriage? We can find the Native Marriage Act or the Civil Marriage Act of 1872, which had done a lot, that is for prohibiting the child marriage. But actually its effect was very limited, because this act was not applicable between Hindus, Muslims and also other recognized faith. And see, the case of B.M. Malabari, he was a Parsi reformer. We have discussed about B.M. Malabari, he was a Parsi reformer. There were several efforts made by him, and ultimately it resulted into the enactment of an Age of Consent Act, that in the 1891, which actually forbade the marriage of girls below the age of 12, which actually prohibited the marriage of girls below the age of 12. Please note this. And see, the Sharda Act, that in the 1930, which pushed the marriage age to 18, that is for the case of boys, and 14 in case of girls. Coming to the Free India, what we can find, the child marriage restraint, that is Amendment Act of 1978, which raised the age of marriage for the girls from 15 to 18 and also for boys 18 to 21. Coming to the education of women, what were the role of different organizations and also different personalities regarding this? So first, the role of Christian missionaries. So it was the Christian missionaries, they were the first to set up the Calcutta Female Juvenile Society, that in the year 1819. Please note this. And we found the Bethune School, which was founded by J.A.D. Bethune, who was the president of the Council of Education in Calcutta, that in the year 1849, Bethune School, which was founded. And we can say that this was the first fruit, or this was the first movement, this was the first step that we can find. It was a powerful movement for the women's education that arose in the 1840s and 1850s. It was a powerful movement. And see the role of Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, we have already discussed about him. Take the role of him. Consider that he got associated with no less than 35 girls' school in Bengal, and he was considered as one of the pioneers of women education in India. And see, from the government side, the Charles Woods Dispatch on Education, that in the 1854, it had made a great stress that is regarding the need for the female education, that it has actually stressed the importance of a female education. Okay, and see, in 1914, the women's medical services, which they given a lot of training to the nurses and midwives. And in the 1916, what we find, the Indian Women's University, which was set up by the Professor D.K. Kaur, that in the year 1916, so which was an outstanding institution in imparting the education to women. So please connect this, that is Professor D.K. Kaur and the Indian Women's University. It was founded in the year 1916. And see, in 1916, the Lady Hardinge Medical College, which was opened in Delhi. And see, the Dufferin Hospitals, in 1818, which was formed. So these Dufferin Hospitals, they provide the health facilities, that is to women. Okay, so it helped the woman in a lot. Okay, now we will be looking into the very participation of the woman in the national movements. So the women, they came into the very national stream. So we see the participation of women in the Swadeshi and also anti-partition and also home rule movements. that in the early 20th century, in this we actually find that a very liberating experience in case of women. See here, women faced lathis, they faced bullets, they were jailed, and they were taking part in the political possessions and also picketing, etc. They were having a liberating experience. And see the involvement, they were also actively participated in the trade union and kisan movements, and also we can found in several revolutionary movements. And see, they also got elected into the various legislatures and local bodies. See the role of Sarojini Naidu. She became the president of Indian National Congress in the year 1925, and also she was the governor of United Province that between the year 1947 to 49. And we see many organizations and institutions that actually came up. See the case of All India Women's Conference that came up in the year 1927. So we will be looking into the different women's organizations separately. Okay, now coming to the different women's organizations that we see in the 1910, that it was Sarla Devi Chaudhary. She actually convened the very first meeting of the Bharat Sri Mahamandal, that in Allahabad, and it was considered as the first major Indian women's organization. It was considered as the first major Indian women's organization which was set up by a woman. Please note this, which was set up by a woman, and which had its objective, that is for the education for women, and it also worked for the abolition of the Parda system, and also for the improvement of the socio-economic and political status of women. Now, Ramabai Ranade, she founded the Ladies Social Conference, that is Bharat Mahila Parishad, under the parent organization, that is National Social Conference, in the year 1904 in Bombay. And it was Pandita Ramabai Saraswati who founded the Arya Mahila Samaj. And see the contribution of this Pandita Ramabai Saraswati. She actually pleaded, that is for the improvement of the educational syllabus of Indian women, and it resulted that she pleaded before the English Education Commission, and it was referred later to the Queen Victoria, which ultimately resulted into the medical education for the woman, which was started in the Lady Dufferin College. And see this, that it was Ramabai Ranade who established a branch of Arya Mahila Samaj in Bombay, and the person who founded the Arya Mahila Samaj, it was the Pandita Ramabai Saraswati. And see, in 1925, the National Council of Women in India, which was formed, it was a national branch of the International Council of Women, which was formed. So this was the National Council of Women in India, which was formed by having a great role which was played by Mehribai Tata. She played a very vital role in this, that is for the formation and also for the advancement of this particular National Council of Women in India. And also please note the other important women who have actually played important positions in the executive committee of the council, that it was Cornelia Sharabji, who was India's first lady barrister, and Tharabai Premchand, Safi Thabji, Maharani Suchara Devi, and she was actually the daughter of Keshab Chandra Sen. Now please note this, the All India Women's Conference, that is AIWC, which was founded by the Margaret Cousins, that in the 1927. You see that it was the first women's organization which was found and for an egalitarian approach, and its first conference which was held in the Ferguson College, that in Pune, and its founding members was Maharani Chimnabai Gaikwad, Rani Shahiba Sankli, Sarojini Naidu, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, and Lady Dhorab Tata. And looking into the objectives of this organization, it worked for the society which was based on the principles of social justice, integrity, equal rights and opportunities, and to secure for every human being, that is the essentials of life. Also please note this, AWC also worked for the various legislative reforms. It resulted into the various legislative reforms. Okay, that is even before and also after the India's independence, and you can find several examples. And these are the examples: the Sharda Act of 1929, Hindu Women's Right to Property Act of 1937, Factory Act of 1947, Hindu Marriage and Divorce Act of 1954, Special Marriage Act of 1954, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act of 1956, Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act of 1956, the Suppression of Immoral Traffic in Women Act of 1958, Maternity Benefits Act of 1961, and Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961, okay, and Equal Remuneration Act of 1958 and later 1976.